Bruno Fernandes is a player that divides the Manchester United fan base. It's either you like him or you don't. There's literally no in between. Maybe there is, but I haven't seen any. His recent interview with Rio Ferdinand does share some insight as to what goes on in that head, how he makes his decisions, his passes, how he copes with the weight and the pressure of being a Manchester United player and a Manchester United captain. So without further ado, let's jump right into it with the first question. Now, I'm going to be paraphrasing here because English is not Bruno's first language, and unless you're actually watching the interview, which I do recommend you go see, it's about 15 minutes, but it goes by like that. Rio Ferdinand is a legend. The questions were amazing and the answers were even better. I'm just going to go touch on a little bit of them. So I am paraphrasing, but it's essentially what he says, right? So the first question Rio asks, you mentioned about risk. How important is risk to you, to Bruno Fernandes' game? Because Bruno, at some point in the interview, talked about taking risks. And his answer was this. He said, I have to take risks, the final pass, the shot, because that's how I help the team. That's one of my biggest qualities. If I stop doing that, I lose a part of who I am as a player. When I first joined the club, the first thing Ollie told me was to take risks. He wanted the same Bruno he saw at Sporting. I knew I couldn't change who I was. I just had to get better at it. And as a Man United fan, that first season Bruno came in was a breath of fresh air. Before he came in, we did have some struggles, and I think fans have short-term memory. They forget how great it was. And now that things are not quite clicking, we've lost some of the quality we've had in our team, like Pogba and those other guys, Cavani. Now it's just him. We tend to forget that this is the same player. It's just now he doesn't have the same quality around it. If this season, for example, his chance creation has gone up like 2.9 per game, because I'm assuming of Mbumo, Cunha, these other guys now in the team, as opposed to like selling players, right? I'm not going to mention their names, but essentially, when you are the number one creator across Europe top leagues, you will have to take risk and you will make mistakes and you will come under the knife sometimes. And I just think the hate he gets and the criticism he gets, it's a byproduct of his creativity. Now, the second question kind of dives a little bit deeper into that. Is like, Rio asked, does it affect you when the media and people criticize you for taking risks and essentially accusing you for caring more about the stats? And this was essentially what he had to say about that. If I wanted to be smart, I wouldn't take risks, because with risk you can get a reward or you can get the other side of it. If I don't take risks, no one will say Bruno is losing the ball or Bruno missed the pass. I will just play the ball sideways or backwards and be safe. But I am not a safe player, because I know that if I play safe, I'm not helping the team. I take risks because I want to help my teammates score goals. He mentioned Benjamin Sesko and Mbumo, basically some forwards of United. And essentially he's saying, if I don't take those risks, then the team suffers, not me. People won't talk about me losing the ball as much, and they will say my passing percentage is 98%. But when you look at those passes, they're sideways and backwards. I'm not affecting the game or helping my teammates get into dangerous positions. Now, you can tell that this is the sound, like he's basically speaking like a player that knows the burden of leadership, right? He knows it all falls on his shoulders. It's not something that he asked for, but it's just the way things are. When you need a goal against Bournemouth from a free kick, who are you going to call? Not Ghostbusters. You call your captain, Bruno Fernandes. If there was somebody else there, for sure, would take some of the load off, because he's not like that at Portugal. When I see him play in Portugal, he's not the main guy, in my opinion. Obviously, there's Cristiano Ronaldo, obviously. But what I'm saying is he doesn't have that much of a burden, and I think he feels like he needs to do everything. Now we're getting better players, though. He's starting to be less like that, I feel. And somewhere he does mention in the interview that he's learning to trust his teammate more. But I think sometimes when you don't have quality around you, and you're the captain of Manchester United, and you can do the things that Bruno can do, you almost can't help but to try and force the issue sometimes. So I completely get where he's coming from. And then he goes on to ask, he did something. Rio Ferdinand, this is why he's amazing. This is why he's a legend. And I'm so happy Bruno was able to see this part, because the next thing he does is he shows him, or he plays a recording of a fan essentially praising him and saying the things that I think a significant majority of the fan base would kind of like share the same sentiments. So he goes, like he plays the audio, and the fan is essentially saying, I just want Bruno to know that every proper red I speak to thinks you are a legend. All that noise from media and the agenda merchants online, none of them really represent us. We see the graft, the running, the work rate. You're the one taking the risks, trying to make things happen. So of course, a few idiots are going to moan, but that's just part of being the main man. And the arm waving just shows you care. So ignore the twats online, keep doing your thing. You make us proud. And I felt like this was a beautiful message for Bruno to hear in this interview. And I'm so glad that Rio recorded that and played to Bruno to let him know that, listen, I know for all the hate you get, this is actually the other side of things. Because let's be real, negativity fuels the algorithm. I don't know how we got here, but if my title is negative, I probably get more views, more people clicking. It's the same thing with footballers, right? And when you really think about what Bruno has done for Manchester United, because people be like, the trophies are not there and everything, but he has elevated this team. If Bruno wasn't here, we probably would have gotten relegated at some point. His impact, his output is crazy, right? And unfortunately, he doesn't have the trophies to back it up. So I can understand if Man United fans will not consider him a legend because of that. I consider him a legend. The same way I consider Totti a legend. I don't think you need tons of trophies to be considered a legend of your club. Your impact and your loyalty and just overall commitment is what, for me, makes you a legend to the club. Like Carrick, I know he won trophies, but Carrick is a legend to this club. And it's just, I don't know. Everyone is different. Everyone has their own definition. But one thing you can't say is this guy has given his best years to Manchester United for sure. Anyways, the next thing he was asked by Rio was if he finds it hard to not be the one that does everything. The reason he asked this question was because now with how the team is playing and trying to build from the back, there's a lot of onus on the centre backs being the guys like basically pushing the ball forward. If you notice Aiden Heaven in the game against Bournemouth, how he's able to drift into the midfield, so from the back to the midfield, and then that transition from the midfield to the forwards is now from Bruno and Mount and those other guys. But essentially the build-up requires our centre backs to be somewhat creative, not really, but more like being able to pass between the lines. So that's why this question was asked, and this was Bruno's reply to this question. Essentially, he said, so the question was, do you find it hard to not be the one that does everything? And he said, I find it difficult at times because I know centre backs don't always feel comfortable playing the ball through the middle between the lines. I need to trust them, especially when they are not under pressure. When they are under pressure, I need to drop in and help them play out. But when they're not under pressure, Lisha, Aiden Heaven, and he lists some other centre backs, he says they'll have the quality to play the ball from the back. Now personally, I don't know about that. I completely disagree. I do not think we have a lot of ball playing centre backs. I think Shaw can be decent sometimes, but there's a difference between being able to give a good pass and being able to receive the ball comfortably and then pick the right pass from the centre back position. When you're far wide, it's a little bit easier. There's not a lot of pressure because you can feel pressure even though you're not being pressured. I don't know if you see what I mean. Aiden looks comfortable on the ball. He was amazing. He talks a little bit more about Aiden in this interview. But essentially, I disagree with that. And I think he just has to say that because he's the captain. So he doesn't want to throw anyone under the bus. But the gist of this is you can tell he finds it hard sometimes to relinquish that responsibility and that trust. But I think he's been doing a little bit more of that this season. Although he still, sometimes you can tell he's trying to do too much because he cares that much for the team. He's the captain and he's the guy that everyone looks to, right? He's the main guy. So he's always trying to force the issue. But yeah, you can kind of tell like he's reassessing and knowing that he needs to start relying on his teammates. And he spoke about Dejan Stankovic, who was an assistant coach in Udinese at some point, telling him that, look, sometimes Bruno, you just gotta make the simple pass, regain your confidence and go forward. And same thing with Ten Hag and Ruben Amorim. So when people talk about the coaches or people around him not telling him stuff, they are telling him, but in the heat of the game, emotions get the best part of him. You can tell he can easily lose his head, which is one of his weak points. But who's perfect? No one's perfect. So I completely hear him there, and I understand as well, because if we did have more quality players around him, we won't see him do the things that he does. Because when we had Pogba and Bruno playing in the same pitch, not a lot of people were talking about Bruno as much. Unfortunately, Pogba was the main guy then, so he was getting the hate from Souness and even from our own fan base, which is kind of crazy. But I digress. I move on. The other thing that he was asked was if he thinks he's underrated. So Rio basically says James Maddison thinks you are underrated, like thinks Bruno's underrated. Like, do you feel that way yourself? His reply was, I'm grateful that he thinks that. It genuinely makes me feel good. But I think most of the criticism comes from rival fans who don't like me. It would hurt me far more if it came from United fans. I know there are supporters who say Bruno isn't good enough, that we should have kept another player or sold him instead, and I know exactly who he's talking about. But you can't be liked by everyone, and you have to learn how to deal with that. When he said that line, kept another player, sold him instead, I knew exactly who he's talking about, and I know you know who he's talking about. I'm not going to name the player, but I also think that decision to get rid of that player created kind of like a player FC that's now anti-Bruno because of that decision. So some people hate Bruno not even because of what Bruno does. They hate Bruno because they got rid of that player. I'm not going to mention his name. You know who that player was, who that player is. I already mentioned his name while I was talking. But yeah, when you look at this, like if you pay attention to his answer here, you can tell that he is aware that there's a minority of the fan base that are not really big supporters of who he is, and he's a very emotional guy. It comes across, I think maybe it's like a Portuguese thing. They're very, you can see from Ruben Amorim, they can get a bit testy sometimes, I feel, but he still keeps a measured approach about it because he's still the captain. And even though he understands that there's a small minority that doesn't really rate his game, the majority of the fans support him, because that's why he said what he said. He said it would hurt me far more if he came from United fans. So then he goes ahead and says, like, even though some say that, so he knows United fans are saying it, but when he's saying it would hurt me more if he came from United fans, it's like if that was a consensus. So he understands that it's on the consensus, and it's mostly rival fans that do that. So I'm happy that he knows that he's loved by and appreciated, and we see the running and the grafting that he does game in, game out. And then they asked him a question about his his leadership style, like as a captain, like how does he lead the team as a captain. And this was what he had to say. He said, I'm very demanding with my players. The day I stop demanding from you is the day I've lost belief in you. If I don't shout after you lose the ball or because you're out of position, it means I don't think you're capable of doing better. For example, in the West Ham game, Sexy lost the ball and I had to shout at him to make it clear he can't lose it in that situation because he's too good for that. The thing with me is that I communicate a lot with my arms, and I know it doesn't always look good. Even the referees tell me to stop waving my arms because from the outside it looks like I'm angry. The people in the stadium don't know what I'm saying, and the refs will say that even when I'm saying positive things, it looks like I'm shouting. And I agree with this. Sometimes it's the optics. When you're just watching Bruno Fernandes as a fan, him doing all of that as a captain creates unease. And even Ferdinand, when he was captain of United, in this interview he would reiterate and back that up and say he used to do stuff with his arms as well, and that creates unrest. But Bruno is saying that, he says in the interview that he's not doing it on purpose. Like, he is emotional, like in the heat of the moment the game is going on. Sometimes that's who he is. He talks with his hand. Even in the shot, if you watch the interview, you see he does love communication with his hands, kind of like me right now. Even in that picture you can see his hands are like this, right? But he says it doesn't come across well, especially when you're the captain. It comes across as like you're whining, you're moaning, you're shouting, or just being angry for no reason. But truth is, it's just the way he is, and I guess that doesn't look well optically. Anyway, he's just giving answers to the critics to let them know, okay, look, this is really what's going on. I do think sometimes he is shouting. It does look like he's shouting. It's not just his hands. Like, I legit think sometimes he is shouting. We can see that, but I understand where he's coming from. And as a captain of Manchester United, as a leader, sometimes you kind of have to lead by example. So when you're displaying certain behaviors on the pitch, it doesn't really look good, and it affects the team as a whole. But yeah, there were other questions as well, but I just want to highlight a few key things that I felt like needed to be said, especially after that other interview that was released recently. So some people were questioning his commitment. Why did he say that? Whatever. But that interview was an old one, by the way. They just released it and it became like this viral wildfire because of the result against Bournemouth. So when you really think about it, this Rio interview was smart because you can tell this was done around after the game against Wolves, before the Bournemouth game. So Rio, and this is why I love Rio, right? Rio is a true Man United legend. He cares about the club, and this is his way to kind of like help calm the flames that came with that other interview. The interview does get a bit lighthearted. They talk about him being the dad of the group, like, you know, when things are going on in the dressing room, like how Aiden Heaven is the prankster and everything. How like Ahmad and Dogu on his left, I forget how he described it, and how they can get really loud because they're youngsters, and how the game is a bit soft now and they're a bit more lenient because during his time, you know, the older ones, when they come in, the younger ones tend to stay quiet, but it's a bit different now and it's a bit lenient, and talks about the struggles and little things. But he says it rejuvenates him, and it kind of gives you a bit of an insight to the vibes behind, like, the basically the vibes in the club right now, the dressing room vibes, and just kind of like how overall everybody is feeling. So I kind of like the aspect of the interview. But anyways, guys, I think that's about it. Yeah, make sure you check out the original interview, though. It's packed with a lot of information, very enjoyable, and the overall interaction was really nice. But don't forget to leave a like and subscribe. That's it for the video. Let me know what you think. If you like the video, obviously hit a like, and yeah, I also want you guys to check out our video, and if you have any pushbacks about his takes or his answers, leave in the comment section below. I'm very curious to hear from you guys. Until next time, it's been the Realistic Red. Bye for now.